There's a popular idea online, it's become almost kind of a truism at this point, that we don't need to see superhero origin stories anymore. How many times do we need to see Uncle Ben get shot, or Batman's parents getting killed, or Superman being sent to Earth in a spaceship after the destruction of Krypton? We already all know these stories, so why not just skip past this point and get to the good stuff? Get to the real stories. This is an idea that I have some sympathy for and has been explicitly endorsed by James Gunn, writer and director of 2025's Superman.
I am myself sick of seeing both Superman and Batman's and Spider-Man's. Those
Right.
three. I'm sick of seeing those three origin stories. I don't need to see them again for a long time. But somebody can come along and surprise me and do it in a way that's cool. You just never.
But I also think that Superman 2025 kind of shows the limits of this approach to storytelling. And I think the many problems I have with this film can be traced back to this fundamental philosophical difference of opinion in how we're supposed to tell stories about these characters that have been adapted and readapted over the decades. Because, on the one hand, sure, most people know that Superman is an alien from the planet Krypton, the planet which was destroyed, and his parents sent him to Earth, where he gets his amazing superpowers from Earth's yellow sun, for whatever reason. And I understand why it could be tempting for a filmmaker to want to skip past this point and just get to the part where Superman is already existing in the world, he's already fighting villains, he's already established some of his basic relationships, so we can get past this trodden ground and into more interesting territory. But on the other hand, there are legitimately compelling reasons to make sure you cover that vital ground when retelling this classic story. What if you're a young person whose first introduction to the character, and therefore their origin, is this movie? I don't think it's a good thing that superhero movies are supposed to only be made for the superfans who've already read dozens of comics, watched shows, and different movies. And more importantly, an origin story is not just an info dump telling us plain facts about how a character got their powers or where they came from. It's also the point where you establish who this character fundamentally is as a person, what motivates them, what kind of story you want to tell with them, what promises you're making to the audience, and how you plan on resolving them. I'm not saying James Gunn should have started this movie with a whole prologue on Krypton, the way Man of Steel did. He can start the movie wherever he wants, but he still needs to give us a basic understanding of who this version of Superman, which we haven't seen in any other movie, show, or comic, is. We need to understand what the baseline normality for him is, so we can understand the significance of the events happening in the movie. And in my opinion, he utterly failed in that regard in this movie. Because how does James Gunn introduce us to Superman's backstory in this movie? I mean, this is supposed to be the beginning of an entirely new cinematic universe, starting with the most iconic, probably the most important superhero of all time. And the way he decides to do that is with an opening text crawl, and not even an interesting one, just one of the most boringly written, plain information. Here are the basic facts you need to know that just tells us, oh, by the way, superhumans exist. By the way, Superman exists. He's like an alien. But then also already some pretty crucial information, like, oh, by the way, he intervened in a military conflict between these two countries, which you've never heard about before. And also, like 3 minutes ago, he just first lost his first fight. Wait, hold on. On the one hand, okay, who cares that 300 years ago superhumans already started existing in this world? Wouldn't that like change everything about this world? Like, how does America exist? Were there superhumans interfering in the American Civil War? Were the superheroes on the side of the British or the Americans? But that being aside, okay, superheroes just exist, but they really didn't affect the world in any meaningful way. Whatever, nitpicks aside. But then you tell us that Superman has already existed in this world for 3 years. Okay, sure enough. But then also that he's that he's intervened in a military conflict for the first time very recently, and that he's also been defeated for the first time, 2 minutes off screen. I feel like that's too important of an information to just kind of drop on us. Again, what does baseline normal for us look like in this world, and how significant is it that Superman intervened in this conflict we know nothing about? Or how significant is it that he lost for the first time? We don't really know how powerful this version of Superman is, so how significant is it that he was defeated by this Hammer of Baravia character, which we know nothing about either? But fine, okay, whatever. Superman was defeated, he flies back to the Fortress of Solitude, he regains some of his strengths, and he starts flying around a bit, and that's fun to see. We want to see Superman flying around, having fun, being a cool guy. And then he flies back to Metropolis, and he's already back in the fight against this new supervillain, who's being directly controlled by Lex Luthor. Again, this is our very first introduction to this version of Lex Luthor, and we're introduced to him immediately in the middle of a fight, without any kind of establishment of what his relationship with Superman exactly is, or why he hates him so much. Yes, you and I know that Lex Luthor just is Superman's villain, and he's just supposed to hate him, because that's who the character is. But we don't know this version of Lex Luthor. So when we're dropped in the middle of a fight between these two characters, it's just like, okay, this is happening. I know these characters abstractly, but I don't feel anything about about Lex Luthor as a villain, or Superman as a hero when they're fighting each other. Because this movie proceeds from the assumption that we know who these characters are from the comics, from the previous movies, so we don't need to waste time establishing them in this movie. And it's not just these characters, it's every single fucking character. The people at the Daily Planet, the members of the Justice Gang, Crypto the Superdog, even Clark's parents. Yes, we might know who these characters are abstractly, but if you don't want to put in the work of actually establishing who they are in this world, then how are we supposed to actually be invested in them? But luckily, James Gunn has a secret trick up his sleeve. Exposition. The dialogue in this movie is atrocious. It's some of the worst I've ever heard in a major blockbuster. Because half of the dialogue is just spent on expositing about the world, expositing about characters' relationships to each other. It's like, in the beginning of the movie, I don't remember if it was the fight with the Hammer of Baravia or if it was already with the big Lex Luthor monster, but it's the scene where Superman gets punched down and like the falafel truck guy helps him up, and he just explicitly says to Superman, "You've been there for us so many times, Superman, now it's time for us to help you." I swear to God, that was like 80% accurate to what he actually said in the movie. And it was at that point in the theater that I realized that, okay, it's gonna be this kind of movie. Remember that scene in Spider-Man where Green Goblin is dangling MJ and the kids off the bridge, and then the people of New York start throwing shit at him, and they're saying like, "If you mess with Spidey, you mess with New York, you mess with all of us." Remember how that scene happened at the very beginning of the movie and wasn't preceded by a whole movie's worth of emotional setup between Spider-Man, Peter Parker, and the people of the city? Remember that scene in Spider-Man 2 where Peter gets knocked out and the people in the train protect his identity and promise not to say anything even when threatened by Dr. Octopus? Remember how that scene happened at the very beginning of the movie without any kind of setup between this version of Spider-Man and his relationship to the average people of New York? Superman wants to have these big emotional payoffs that fit with the character. It is fitting that a regular person would want to help Superman when he's down. But when this is the very first time we've seen these characters in this universe, it just feels totally unearned. We don't know who these people are. We don't know how Superman saves them. We just know that Superman is a character in comics and movies and shows who saves people, so it would make sense that other people would be nice to him in return. Okay, that's very satisfying. This movie has so many different plot points, which in theory, on paper, are set up and kind of paid off. There is one scene at the beginning of the movie where Lois and Clark are shown to be in a lovey-dovey relationship, early on, but still, and then one scene where they kiss and fly up in the air and it's so beautiful and romantic, and yeah, sure, but how much do we really know about these characters? What have they done? They had one scene where we actually built their relationship, and then one scene where they have some kind of big kiss. Is this supposed to be paying off something? Is this a movie where Lois and Clark really try to figure out their relationship with each other? Not really. They're in a relationship, a kind of little 3-month situationship, even though Lois already knows who Clark is. Kind of a big secret to already reveal to your coworker crush, but whatever. And then one scene at the very end where they kiss and it's all romantic and oh, so beautiful. But this isn't paying off anything. This isn't a movie about Lois and Clark figuring out the nature of their relationship. It's not a movie about whether or not Clark wants to involve Lois in his superhero lifestyle, and that this kiss at the end comes as an affirmation of their love and that their struggle is worth it. It's just, oh, they're in a relationship, they kiss, okay. Same thing with Clark's parents. We get one scene at the beginning that's basically comic relief, them talking on the phone and oh, isn't it funny? Sure, whatever. And then after Superman gets defeated was it in the Phantom Zone or whatever, and they fly him back to the Kent farm, and we get a few talks with him and his dad. And oh, it's supposed to be so emotional and raw, and this is what the character is all about, just being a little guy. But this is the first conversation we've seen between these characters. Again, James Gunn knows that we know that Pa Kent is supposed to be this moral pillar in Superman's life, and that they have this long emotional relationship, and that Superman loves his dad because, yeah, of course he does. And then at the very end of the movie, we see him looking at the videos of his Earth parents, and it's supposed to be this big emotional payoff because his Kryptonian parents were trying to do the great replacement on Earth, I guess. But first of all, again, we've only seen Pa Kent and the Kent family in like one other scene before this. How is this supposed to be an emotional payoff? And also, let me just say that the whole subplot with Superman's Kryptonian parents felt totally pointless. Again, first of all, we get introduced to these characters via a fucking hologram. Okay, cool. And then we learn that there's this holographic message that Superman plays on repeat, like his iPod stuck on replay, AAA. But the ending is missing. Ooh, what could that mean? But then, again, pretty early on in the movie, like the first third of the movie, we learn that, ooh, actually, Jor-El and Superman's parents sent him here not as a refugee to be a light on the world, but actually to conquer and to spread his seed among the Earth women. Ooh. And it's like, okay, first off, again, who are these people? We barely know what significance these versions of Superman's parents actually are to him. We just know abstractly that, oh yeah, Superman has his human parents and he also has the holograms of his space parents. Okay, what do they mean to him? Is a large part of Superman's identity tied to his Kryptonian heritage? Of course, we know that part of it is, because we've seen other Superman media. How much is that the case in this movie? And then there's this mini crisis of, oh, I was sent here not to be a hero, but to be a conqueror. And it's like, okay, but you've already been a superhero for 3 years. It doesn't seem to be the case that your mission was purely driven by what you thought your Kryptonian parents wanted it to be, and that this new revelation is somehow really shaking your faith about who you're supposed to be in the world. Like, for what it's worth, we know that Superman, even in this movie, is gonna stay a good guy. So when there's no real internal conflict for Superman, or any question on the audience's part of, ooh, is he actually gonna go bad now? No, of course he isn't. Then it's just a waste of time. The biggest impact this whole subplot has is the whole social media angle where Lex Luthor reveals it to the world, and like that, on a dime, everyone in the world suddenly hates Superman. Like, it's just comedic to watch in the theater that this scene happens, and then suddenly everyone around them who he just saved from a giant monster, along with all the other members of the Justice Gang, suddenly start hating him because they're on their phone and they go, oh, we hate you, Superman, you're so evil. Like, what? Again, the writing in this movie is awful. James Gunn could have told an interesting story about the influence of social media, how information gets distorted, and how this might affect such a hopeful and optimistic character as Superman. But instead we get space monkeys writing mean tweets. Okay, cool. Haha, glad we got a Family Guy joke instead of an actual interesting exploration of a political theme in this movie. And then at the very end of the movie, when it's revealed that Lex Luthor was actually the one pulling the strings behind the scenes the whole time, then suddenly, again, on a dime, everybody again loves Superman, even though it's still known that he was technically sent to Earth to be a conqueror, but because the story needs everyone to love him again, suddenly the world loves Superman again. And yeah, talking about Lex Luthor, what a fucking disappointment of a character. Really? People are praising this aspect of the movie? This guy? I already talked about how we don't really understand him as a villain. Why does he hate Superman? Oh, because he's Lex Luthor. But then at the very end, of course, we get him angrily yelling his motivation to the audience, because that's the only way James Gunn knows how to write these characters, by explicitly yelling their motivations to the camera. And even if you want to say, okay, what does it really matter? Lex Luthor is just supposed to be a one-dimensional bad guy, he's evil because he's evil, and Nicholas Holt's having fun with the role. Sure, maybe, but even a one-dimensional evil because evil villain can be done more interestingly than this. Remember Puss in Boots: The Last Wish, and how everybody fucking loved Jack Horner as a villain? Remember how his hatred for everything magical was established because he, as a character from a nursery rhyme nobody remembers, never got the same attention as the actual magical characters? and remember how that actually informed a lot of his decisions as a character. It informed why he wanted the magical powers, and also a bunch of other funny things in the movie, like the way he doesn't wield Excalibur by pulling it out of the stone, but by simply wielding it like a hammer, stone attached. Or how he uses the phoenix not as a symbol of life and rebirth, but as a goddamn flamethrower. What do we get with Lex Luthor? How is his one-dimensionality used in a funny or entertaining way in this movie? Even the performance. I mean, Lex Luthor in basically every other version of Superman is at least intimidating. He's kind of cool, threatening. In this movie, Nicholas Hoult just plays him as a pissy little bitch.
Ugly dog in a cave.
What did you say?
And sure, it can be funny for like one instant. Nicholas Hoult is great at chewing the scenery. But for the majority of the movie, you just wanna be away from him. He's just kind of this cringe, annoying loser. Compare that to Jack Horner, who is equally one-dimensional as Lex, but he's still fun to watch because he just enjoys being evil that much, because he can still move between being calm and absolutely psychotic, and you never know where he's gonna go in the scene. All I'm saying is, when we have real-life evil bald billionaires that are more scary than this fictional bald billionaire, something's gone wrong. And oh my god, talk about the problem with exposition in this movie. Even the action scenes are exposited directly to us, the audience. Like, it was kind of funny as a joke that Lex Luthor kind of inputs the fighting codes from evil Superman by directly saying them. Like, oh, 55B, 7A. Okay, sure, fine. But then as the movie goes on and he does it again and again and again, and during the dramatic climax of the movie, where Superman is almost directly defeated and he just keeps screaming, 1A, 1A, 1A. Okay, yeah, it's funny in TikTok clips, maybe, but this is supposed to be the climax of the movie where Superman is at his lowest, and the movie is basically telling us, the villain punches him, the villain punches him, the villain punches him. Like, is this the place for this? And yeah, talking about the action scenes, like, okay, James Gunn knows how to shoot a visually interesting action sequence. Like, there are plenty of cool shots, like the one where Superman is like attached to this one bad guy and he spins around and he hits the other one with him, and when they're flying around, or there's this big 360 shot of Lex Luthor attacking the Fortress of Solitude, which was in the trailers, and yeah, that can be fun. But James, I beg of you, cool it down with the wide-angle close-ups. How is like every other shot in this movie just a wide-angle close-up of a character's face in an action movie? Oh, need a shot of Superman flying? Wow, so many possibilities to film the awesome feat of human flight. And how does James Gunn do it? Wide-angle close-up. Like, half the flying shots in this movie are just wide-angle close-ups, either directly of the character's face or slightly off to the side. Wow! Revolutionary visual storytelling. And yeah, also my concerns about the blue filter in this movie from the trailers were warranted. Like, why? Why make it look like this? Why have everything be this ugly, blown out, zero contrast, like ugly blue look? I mean, is any style better than the no style in the Marvel movies, or the completely dark and illegible darkness of the previous Snyder movies? I don't know, there needs to be a better way than this. And while I'm talking about ugliness, the costumes in this movie, like, they're not necessarily ugly. I like the costumes fine, especially Superman's costume. It's good, whatever. I kind of like the fact that it looks more practical. It's not completely vacuum sealed to his body. It looks like a real costume. But every single one of these superhero costumes, from Superman to the Justice Gang, look like they were made by the exact same person. They all have this stupid, like, lines on the body that every superhero costume has for some reason. Like, did they all get made by the same tailor? Isn't the point of a superhero team like the Justice Gang that you have different superheroes with different characteristics and different powers and different looks, different costumes, teaming up with each other? But no, the Space Cop, the Valkyrie, and Mr. Robot all have the same basic design language for their costumes. Cool. And yeah, speaking of the Justice Gang, which, by the way, while watching this movie, I was kind of worried that James Gunn's humor wasn't really up to snuff. Like, I think they did the joke 4 or 5 times of Green Lantern saying, "Oh, we're the Justice Gang," and Hawkgirl saying, "No, we're not," and Green Lantern saying, "Yes, we are." But the 6th time they did it, that really paid off for me. That made it all worth it in the end, honestly. But yeah, again, same problem. Like, we just get introduced to these characters out of nowhere. And okay, maybe with Superman you could make a stronger case that we don't need to see his origin story as well. Like, find me a person in the world who doesn't at least know who Superman is. But can we really trust that every person knows Hawkgirl? I mean, sure, she was in a lot of animated shows, so I guess, but do we really get any information about who she is or what her deal is? Or and then Green Lantern? Okay, I need to talk about this because I know that Guy Gardner as Green Lantern has existed in the comics for decades in some form or another, but he's a joke character, right? Like, the whole point of the Green Lanterns is that they're these stern, hopeful, stalwart characters, and then you have this one guy who is part of them, but he's a sarcastic asshole, like, haha, we get it. But like, yeah, we get it because we know the general vibe of Green Lantern, but we don't know the Green Lanterns in this movie, we don't know what makes him special. Imagine if you're just like a general audience member, you kind of like superhero movies, but you didn't really watch any of the shows, you didn't see the 2011 Ryan Reynolds one, and then this guy shows up and he's just like, there. Okay. So he's just like the so manyth character to be a sarcastic asshole in this movie. And Mr. Terrific, like, yeah, he was good. I liked him. Not mind-blowing, honestly, but he was cool. I didn't quite understand what his powers were exactly. It seemed to mostly just be
everything's computer.
And then he also like had his balls and everything. But he was cool in every scene, so thumbs up for Mr. Terrific. But the whole Justice Gang again suffers from the same problem, that we're not really given enough time to find out who these characters are for their arc in the movie to feel satisfying. Because on paper, I like the fact that at the end of the movie, Superman has to choose between saving Metropolis from Lex Luthor and the interdimensional rift and and intervening between the two countries or whatever. And he can't do both at the same time. And while watching it, I legitimately thought like, oh damn, how are they gonna do this? And then it turns out that, oh, Superman is fighting Lex Luthor, and actually the Justice Gang, who had been very hesitant about interfering in global affairs earlier on in the movie, actually intervened between this war. Okay, cool. Technically, it works. But again, does it feel really satisfying? Does it feel earned? Did this movie really spend any significant amount of time, except for that one scene in the Hall of Justice or whatever it was, of them talking about how they view their role in society, why they do or don't want to intervene? Not really. Or do we just get a bunch of scenes with them being sarcastic assholes? Every plot point in this movie is just thing happens, thing happens, thing happens. And while on paper some of the setup is there, when the actual connective tissue between the scenes isn't there, or it's made up of god-awful writing and dialogue, it's just not enough to carry a movie. This lack of connective tissue between any of the important scenes in the movie really made me realize something, that holy shit, this is like the first movie to be specifically made to be watched in 1 minute long TikTok clips. Well, the second movie, the first one was Oppenheimer. I feel like a lot of people like this movie because they want to like a movie that presents a hopeful, optimistic image that moves away from the overly serious superhero movies that have dominated for the past almost 20 years. And they see this movie, which on its face asserts itself to be that hopeful, optimistic, lighthearted version of a superhero story. But even this angle of the movie only goes skin deep. Because yeah, from the start of the movie, Superman is just kind of a cheery, optimistic character. Fine, whatever. But it's never challenged in any way. It's not explored in any way that actually makes it interesting. Like, the most we get is Lois telling Clark that he thinks everyone is beautiful, and Clark saying, well, maybe being kind is punk rock. Like, sure, it's a funny tweet, but it doesn't really motivate any drama in the story, does it? And then at the very end of the movie, right after Lex Luthor exposited his motivation to us, Superman exposits his motivation to us. I'm human, I make mistakes, and it's like, yeah buddy, we knew, it's fine. Was this ever challenged? Was this ever questioned? Is this supposed to be paying off some kind of setup? No. The only thing that was set up was Crypto ruining this emotional climax by jumping on Lex Luthor and mauling him to death. Well, not quite to death, but whatever. Because ironically, I, as an audience member, was trained like a dog to expect any emotional moment to be immediately undercut by some stupid joke involving Crypto. Okay, funny, haha. Glad we got a funny dog joke instead of an actual emotionally satisfying climax. Like, people love this movie, and they love it because of that supposed optimistic tone and message. But in the same way that this is not a movie about Lois and Clark's relationship, or a movie about Clark balancing his human heritage with his Kryptonian heritage. This is not a movie about the value of hopefulness and optimism in a dark world. It's just a movie where Clark is a nice guy and he says it a couple of times. You know, we actually have movies that involve optimistic, good-hearted characters and explore those ideas within the drama of the film, right? We have Paddington. We even have Captain America movies. We even have a series of movies about a godlike superhuman who's motivated by his indomitable will and faith in the goodness of humanity to save the world and inspire the people around him. His name is goddamn Ethan Hunt.
Hunt is uniquely trained and highly motivated. A specialist without equal, immune to any countermeasures. There is no secret he cannot extract, no security he cannot breach, no person he cannot become. Hunt is the living manifestation of destiny.
And in every Mission Impossible movie, his belief in the goodness of humanity and that every person is worth saving is challenged at every point, and yet he refuses to give up.
If I stay, I'll be safe. You'll protect me. Is that it?
Yes.
No. I can't promise you that. None of us can. But I swear, your life will always matter more to me than my own.
You don't even know me.
What difference does that make?
That is an interesting, aspirational, optimistic character. This? Who's this? This is just like a nice guy. But at what point is he actually challenged in the movie? At what point do we find out who this person is through the decisions they make and the consequences they face? And now we're also gonna get this Supergirl movie and, like, excuse me, what the fuck is this? Is this supposed to be my bright, optimistic superhero franchise, or is this fucking The Boys? I was actually pretty optimistic when I learned that Millie Alcock, the realm's delight, would be playing Supergirl. But now, after seeing her in this movie and seeing the poster and like, why would I be excited? I've already seen the movie. I already know what it's gonna be. Supergirl is gonna be a sarcastic asshole and she's gonna be as vulgar as she can be within a PG-13 rating, of course. And it's just gonna look ugly and played out and unfunny, and at the end of the movie she's gonna learn some kind of lesson about the value of being nice or... And oh yeah, Supergirl, she just already exists in this world. She already has her outfit and everything. No need to set her up, no need to establish her relationship to Clark or Krypton or the rest of the world. Whatever, dude, we'll exposit it later in the other movie. I hope you saw the earlier Supergirl movie. I hope you read the comics. I hope you watched some other kind of show to understand this new character. Because while a lot of people believe that Superman 2025 is a hopeful and optimistic movie, it is my contention that this is a deeply cynical movie. Because it's a movie that's aware that it's not a movie. It's a movie that doesn't even try to be its own movie, to tell its own story. Instead relying on other movies, shows, comics to do the actual heavy lifting of setting up its characters and getting us emotionally invested in them. It's an un-movie. It's a movie that looks at the overflowing landfill of superhero content and doesn't try to reinvent anything. It doesn't try to start fresh or justify its place within this overcrowded field. It just plops down and accepts the fact that it doesn't need to try. It can just exist happily alongside the rest of the garbage, playing the hits to the pre-existing base of superhero fans. An audience that is aware of how tired and played out this whole genre is, but doesn't actually want anything new or interesting done with it. It just wants the same comfort food it's been getting for the past decades in its most pure, unadulterated state. James Gunn's Superman exists very explicitly as a reaction to the trends that have dominated superhero media over the last 10 years. And while I am not one to make predictions, an eventual counter-reaction to this style of superhero filmmaking would be the least surprising thing in the world. Because sure, maybe the DCEU is going to be successful for 5 years, or even more, but eventually, at some point, audiences are going to have to get tired of characters that aren't characters, but just faces of properties. At some point, much the same way that audiences now have gotten a bit tired of these superhero characters being portrayed as too serious and dramatic, they're gonna want their characters to be taken a little bit serious and to have a little bit of drama in their stories. Because if this is the final stage of the superhero genre in cinema, it will not die with a bang, but with a whimper. With movies made for only the most insular audiences of pre-existing fans who've seen all the movies, read all the comics with the most obscure characters, and know all the in-jokes. It will not be a noble death for the superhero genre, but perhaps a necessary one. Because if you don't think we should tell the origin stories, aka the stories of our characters in our superhero movies, then maybe we just shouldn't make any new superhero movies at all.